Hey, thanks for bearing with me there. I've got the furniture out of the way. So what is ESG? Environmental, social and governance, or ESG, is among the hottest topics in the environmental and investment worlds these days. The criteria around environmental are those that we've worked with for years, essentially measuring how a company rates in its protection of the environment. The social criteria measure a company's relationship with its employees, customers, other businesses, and the community around it. Governance looks at a company's leadership, how executives are compensated relative to the company's sustainability goals and the internal controls protecting the integrity of a company's business information. So, companies disclose information about their goals and performance in an ESG report, outlining the company's ESG footprint, challenges, successes, and future plans. Increasingly, firms and members of the public use ESG performance as an important criteria to determine whether to invest in a business or whether to buy their products. Having a positive ESG story to tell will become more and more important. So you may ask, are there regulatory drivers to ESG? In a word, no, but there are numerous reporting frameworks. Since April 2019, the UK government's streamlined energy and carbon reporting requirements came into force, and from that year, there's climate-related disclosure reporting also required from some point this year, depending on the size of your company. The numerous frameworks create both opportunities and challenges when developing ESG reports. On one hand, many of us are engineers and scientists and want concrete numbers and standards and targets to comply with. On the other, the variety of reporting methodologies available allows a firm to choose the one that is best fit for their sector or allows for the most positive ESG story. Each framework has its own metrics, methodology, and scoring system. Some are tuned to specific industries and sectors, while others focus on the needs of a specific stakeholder or stakeholder group. So, where possible, it's best to choose one that's both widely accepted and in use by companies in your sector, so that you can make comparisons between your firm and those with which you compete. So, if you want to get started on an ESG journey, the good news is, regardless of whether you're aware of it or not, or even call it ESG, you already have. Most companies have been collecting data, especially greenhouse gas emissions, for years, especially since the 2018 baseline for oil and gas operators to feed into their sustainability or other corporate reports. In many ways, ESG can be looked at as an expansion of those efforts. The first step is to conduct an internal benchmarking to understand what data you've been collecting, the accuracy of that data, and to identify any gaps in the data collection, controls that may need to be corrected. The next step is a materiality assessment. A materiality assessment is those topics that have a direct or indirect impact on an organization's ability to create, preserve, or erode economic, environmental, and social value for itself, its stakeholders, and society at large. However, materiality also has an external context, as you will evaluate what investors and other entities consider important. Understanding the difference between the two and where the synergies lie is critical to maximizing your efforts in defining your ESG footprint and to prevent wasting resources on things that actually don't matter as much to your business or even your target audience. There are definitely benefits and risks of ESG reporting. Aside from telling your ESG story and improving the organization's reputation, The process of developing strong ESG reporting practices provides several internal benefits. It forces the development of stronger data collection, assurance and control practices. It increases internal understanding of risks and opportunities for improvement. And it improves internal processes and efficiency. This all creates a more concrete link between financial and environmental performance. Improving awareness of the environmental footprint, not only of your company, but of your third-party suppliers, can only be a good thing. However, ESG reporting does not come without potential risks. It's critical that any statements made in an organization's ESG report are backed by concrete data and are easily defensible to prevent questions about credibility of the report and accusations of greenwashing. Take it from me, outside stakeholders will be watching and questions will be asked. It's critical to be prepared to answer those questions, not only about your own activities, but those of the organizations with whom you partner. So, this presentation on ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is focusing on the G element. The pillars of governance in ESG are bribery and corruption, board diversity, ethics, executive compensation, political lobbying, procurement practices, business resilience, and risk management. Well, I'll be honest with you. Governance would not be my preferred topic to talk on here. Although I've been writing the ESG reports for a number of companies, governance can be a little dry. However, governance is so important as it binds everything together and touches on all aspects. So, as promised, I'm going to focus on the G in ESG. So, may the G-force be with you. So, now, taking a Star Wars theme, as you've perhaps guessed, we'll look at bribery and corruption and the issues of the dark side. Now, I don't expect that we'll be starting to fight off the dark side and the dark forces in bribery and corruption like Darth Vader did, so as we can avoid the dark side. However, bribery and corruption is something that businesses have been aware of and working to eradicate for many years. Sadly, it is still common practice in some areas of the world and is accepted that this is how business is done. Breaking the cycle is not as easy as we'd hope it would be. The difference with ESG is we are now looking outside our normal business focus and asking questions that go beyond the services that are being offered and the price that's being quoted. That applies equally to our own companies as well as our suppliers. So this is where you don't want to let all of your hard work on achieving your corporate ESG objectives disappear. We certainly do not want to go to the dark side. It's time to ask some searching questions on all aspects of the business and of our suppliers. What do our internal audits and supply audits tell us? Are we even asking the right questions? The next pillar is board diversity. And in the Jedi Council, there were all walks of life represented. And it is important that companies have a similar approach, whereby the board is seen to represent the whole company and wider society. We have seen how the youth of our society have raised the issue of how we treat the environment. Think of the actions of Greta Thunberg. Diversity of board is not just about age. You need to consider gender, ethnicity, and disabilities, as well as beliefs when we talk about diversity. The ability of a board to represent wider society is certainly a challenge for all companies. So you need to consider how you and your company is ensuring that people's voices get heard all the way up to board level. Now, a great example of ethics in the Star Wars films is the Mandalorian's code of ethics. The Mandalorians have a distinct code of ethics and ideology, and we do well to adopt a similar belief in our own company's code. Ethics is where the difference between genuinely wanting to achieve your ESG objectives and just doing it so as you look good really comes in. Board leadership is setting a vision and creating a culture, and this is key in this area, along with having measurable ESG objects. However, the demand for this is being driven from outside companies, by shareholders, stakeholders, and wider society. Also, the desire to hold companies to account is leading to calls for greater transparency on ESG issues. This then pushes more reporting requirements. Large and publicly listed companies already have to comply with the Streamlined Energy and Carbon Reporting, or SCR regs. The government's making it mandatory from this year for large companies to disclose information in alignment with the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. Gosh, that's a mouthful. And becoming the first G20 nation to enshrine it into law. So, gosh, we start to look now at executive compensation. And for those who don't know, Jabba the Hutt certainly wasn't fair and equitable. Okay, so what we need are corporate leaders, that they should be measured against objectives that are fair and equitable and paid accordingly. If we are really serious about our ESG objectives, then this should form part of the objectives that the corporate leaders are measured against. Now, political lobbying. Gosh, a Harvard Law School forum on corporate governance papers by Timothy Smith and John Keenan states, corporate lobbying to influence law and regulations affect all aspects of the economy, and issues from climate change and medicine prices to financial regulation, immigration and workers' rights. They go on to note that investors are concerned lobbying can pose reputational risks if it contradicts a company's publicly stated position. A super example of value incongruity. So, a company's reputation is an important component of shareholder value. Political lobbying is not a practice that we would all identify with, but to some extent, most of us and our companies have undertaken some element of political lobbying. Is something that we should be aware of and need to make sure that our objectives and values are not undermined by misguided or unintended actions of our company or its representatives. Now, the political lobbying leads us on to the next pillar, which is our procurement practices. Now, this example again from Star Wars, were the Jawas. Now, the Jawas are scavengers, and they had a reputation for swindling, selling hastily refurbished equipment, and faulty droids. Now, purchasers were aware of this, but often purchased the goods anyway, because they were hard-pressed to find a better selection in their remote locations. Our corporate ESG values and objectives should run through us like a stick of rock, and this also follows for our procurement practices. If the corporate leadership is genuine, then there should be pressure to not accept suppliers if they are not working to meet their own and our ESG objectives. It'll be hard to change the way that things have been done. But there may also be a higher price to pay for companies that are serious about their ESG actions. And this is where the board leadership and ethics that we spoke about earlier come into play. to ensure that these factors do not derail us from working to achieve our ESG objectives. It may be that we have to work with the supply chain to achieve our desired position, but these things are often not impossible if we're willing to make the effort. Now, the next pillar is business resilience. I've used this one where the Jedis seem to come back from the dead. So they keep coming back, they're very resilient. However, there are two meanings to resilience. One is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, or the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. So we've got toughness and elasticity. And as companies, we need to be able to adapt to new technology, changing legislation and regulations, along with a changing marketplace. And I think we've seen all of those things in the last few weeks where everything has changed, from legislation on imports and exports to the marketplace and where oil prices up and down. So resilience is a word that has gained in usage throughout the pandemic, and every company has faced the need to adapt quickly to the changing external situation. Here, as I'd mentioned, in the oil and gas industry, we've faced other changes as a result of the environmental movement. The initial rejection of Cambo, the COP26 discussions, changes in oil and gas prices, major slumps and dramatic highs, along with public sentiment towards oil and gas companies. If we're serious about our ESG objectives, then we're going to need to keep adapting, but keep demonstrating that we mean it. Our processes will help to keep us following our desired path, and the measurement and reporting will be a key way to demonstrate our progress. So, in risk management, here we have Princess Leia putting some information, critical information, into the droid. So if she's captured, the information still gets through, which will allow the bombing of the Death Star, an opportunity to get the information through. Managing risk is a fundamental and integral part of managing a business. But risk is not all about the downside. There can be an upside, so it is about how we manage the opportunities. As you would expect, knowledge is key to making the most of this. If we understand what, as a company, we're good at and where our weaknesses are, then we should be in the best position to appreciate which risks we can actively take and where we should avoid risk or pass it on to others. This applies equally to our personal risk management. We take risks every day, but some risks we're able to choose to avoid, such as not driving when tired, or opportunities such as crossing the road only using a zebra crossing. If we genuinely care about the environment, then our choice of transport, gas and electricity supplier, where we buy our groceries, are all affected by this desire to reduce our impact on the environment. When we apply this to our ESG objectives, are we sure that we have asked the questions and gathered the information so that our decisions can reflect our values and not jeopardize our corporate reputation? Now, that was quite long. I've tried to make it quite interesting, but to sort of recap a little. Corporate governance provides principles for the management of companies. A successful company is led by an effective and entrepreneurial board whose role is to promote the long-term sustainability success of the company, generating value for shareholders and contributing to wider society. This breaks down into a few key areas. Leadership. Now, the leadership sets the corporate vision and culture. This is where the difference between believing it and doing it to look good comes from. Measuring achievement, you need the appropriate resources to meet your objectives, but more importantly, to measure your progress against those objectives. You need a means of raising concerns. The youth of our society are leading our thoughts on the environment. How are you ensuring that voice gets heard? And most importantly, in my mind, company and personal integrity. Now, thank you so much for listening. I hope it was informative and interesting. I see a number of questions coming through the chat box. I'm just going to go to the holding slide and bring my furniture back, and I'll be back in a minute or two. Thank you.